Iroh was an older firebending general born to the Fire Nation. Privileged, but not spoiled. Iroh was born into royalty as the eldest son of Fire Lord Azulan and Ayla. He would become an accomplished member of the Fire Nation as the heir to the throne. He was deemed a firebending master and a Grand Lotus in the White Lotus organization. At his height, it was said that Iroh would slay the last dragon in the world, which earned him his famed nickname, the Dragon of the West. However, his achievements did not stop in the physical world. Iroh was an extremely spiritual person, often visiting the spirit world with relative ease. In his retirement, he would go on to have a simple life, serving tea until the day that he passed on to the spirit world for good. Iroh was one of the most powerful firebenders of his age, though he was easily overlooked because of his everlasting humility. Tenzin was a middle-aged airbending master, born from Katara and Avatar Aang. Tenzin was the first airbender born in 100 years. His father would teach him all there was to know about airbending culture, and it would be an astounding responsibility for Tenzin to hold. At some point before his adulthood, he will be recognized as an airbending master, earning his air nomad tattoos. As an adult, Tenzin would take a place on the United Republic Council, consulting policies and proceedings in Republic City. However, after harmonic convergence, he and his family would relocate to the Northern Air Temple, where he would go on to teach new airbenders. But his instruction would be cut short, as the Here and Red Lotus would come to destroy their temple. Still, Tenzin was able to defend against all 4 of the Red Lotus members, until finally succumbing under their combined might. Even though Tenzin was the first airbender in 100 years, he did not lack for skill or application. As with all my Versus videos, I will be analyzing these two in their primes. For Iroh, this will be his time as a young general when he was able to kill the last dragon. For Tenzin, this will be his time after harmonic convergence. Because we are observing Iroh in his prime, his physical attributes will be at its peak. We may have seen him closest to this after his imprisonment when he retrained his physical body. We can assume that his physical state would be amplified in his prime. Iroh has agility and strength, able to take on multiple opponents with immense power. One such example comes from his battle with Earthbenders, where he was able to attack and defend with only a chain while his hands were bound, giving him an astounding feat in hand-to-hand combat. In fact, Iroh is depicted to be accomplished in hand-to-hand combat on more than one occasion. It is my belief that Tenzin experienced his prime sometime in his early 40s, but he was still extremely fit. Though he had less bulk than Iroh, he made up for it in his agility. Like most airbenders, agility would be Tenzin's #1 asset in a fight. Airbenders were very defensive, their styles akin to jiu-jitsu wrestling, taking the strength of their opponent and redirecting it back at them. What's more, Tenzin was a shaved monk, meaning he had heightened abilities for hypersensitivity. Because of his bald head, he could feel impending attacks headed his way, able to evade and redirect. This would also extend to his ability to defend against opponents at hand-to-hand combat, a prime example being his ability to defend against chi blockers in Republic City, even with his own hands being bound. Generally, Tenzin's MO was to outlast his opponents, a testament to his stamina, which makes sense as he was able to run 10 miles without tiring. This round is certainly a battle between strength and agility. While Iroh is relatively nimble, he generally favored his strength. Tenzin would by far be the more agile of the two. His entire life training was based around his flexibility. However, Tenzin's strength pales in comparison against Iroh. Yes, Tenzin did withstand a brutal beating at the hands of the Red Lotus, but Iroh could bounce back even from old age. So the deciding factor between these two would be whose abilities in strength and agility were more prolific. But really, I do not see major disparities between the two. Clearly, Iroh has more strength, while Tenzin has more agility. Neither is lacking in their opposing attributes either, Tenzin having solid strength and Iroh having stable agility. Thus, I cannot give the definitive edge to either, and I mark them as equals in regards to their physical attributes. As a Fire Lord General, Iroh was considered a master of firebending. Had Avatar Aang failed in his attempts to defeat Fire Lord Ozai, Iroh would have been the only other bender to challenge him. But Iroh transcended the simple applications of firebending. Unlike most firebenders, who drew from their raw, aggressive emotions, Iroh had an open mind and a calm demeanor. Iroh's open mindset would afford him a diverse use of firebending, as he would take on movements from earth, air, and waterbenders. His mastery of firebending was so extensive, he even taught himself fire breathing. While this ability was not exclusive to him, it was very rare. Legend would have it that he learned, or at least adapted the technique, from his time fighting the last dragons. While other master firebenders had the ability to conjure lightning, few could redirect it. After observing and studying the movements of waterbenders, Iroh taught himself how to take a direct lightning attack into himself and shoot it out again. This would be useful against not only other lightning benders, but natural lightning storms as well. As Iroh would tell Zuko, for one to generate and redirect lightning, they had to have a perfect calmness of mind. Being the first naturally born airbender in over 100 years has its advantages and disadvantages. Aang knew he would have to pass all he knew to his only airbending son. Therefore, Tenzin got almost all of his father's attention during his upbringing. Though this would cause a rift between he and his siblings, it would be invaluable to his development as an airbender. Tenzin is well practiced in all known airbending techniques. While he was generally a pacifist who preferred meditation over combat, he was extremely capable. Against the Equalists of Republic City, he was able to repel several Mechna tanks at once. Not to mention, he was the only bender to land a decisive blow on Amon, who was too much for most of the other benders in Republic City, including the Avatar. It is noted that he did have some help from Mako in this regard, but it is still significant that he landed an air sweep at all. Perhaps the best example of Tenzin's airbending abilities lies in his fight against Zahir and the other Red Lotus members. In the fight, Tenzin utilized all of his bending abilities, working at Zahir slowly until he was finally able to get the upper hand. Zahir would need the aid of his crew to defeat Tenzin, but even with their help, Tenzin was able to repel them all for a time. Airbending was a very evasive element. It was also the most dynamic of all the elements, able to turn a flowing defense into a powerful offense. This would allow Tenzin and other users of the element to adapt to many situations. This is why I believe Tenzin is able to fight groups and single opponents so well. His abilities allow him to defend and attack in all directions, but he can also move with precision and finesse. However, airbending lacked a strong offense. While airbenders were capable of powerful offensive strikes, it usually paled in comparison to the devastation of a firebender or an earthbender. This round is interesting because these two characters have very similar mentalities. It was commonplace for an airbender to have a calm and tranquil demeanor, but it was almost unheard of for a firebender to conduct himself in the same way. While Tenzin was comprehensively the most well-rounded and complete airbender master of his time, Iroh was a firebending prodigy with immense skill. Though Tenzin's use of airbending was dynamic, so was Iroh's use of firebending. They match each other's versatility, though I would say Iroh had a few more tools to work with. Instead of just his standard firebending movements, he also had his fire breathing and lightning bending. What's more, even his standard attacks were adapted from other disciplines, giving him an edge in the unorthodox. Any fight between a firebender and an airbender is almost always a fight of offense versus defense. But that would not be the case between Iroh and Tenzin. Yes, Iroh had a devastating offense, as almost all firebenders did. Yes, Tenzin had a stonewall defense, as almost all airbenders did. But they both had great attributes in their offense and defense. I would say it would come down to a dissection of how good Iroh's offense and Tenzin's defense is. We have seen the power in Iroh's offense, the same power that could thwart the last of the dragons. We have seen the apex of Tenzin's defensive efforts, defending against several of the best benders of his time. But what of Tenzin's offense? It was extremely good and he was extremely capable, as evidenced in his fights with the Equalists Amon and the Red Lotus. So he was not lacking in that regard. So it comes down to Iroh's defense. It too was very good. He was even able to teach himself how to redirect lightning. Of course, Tenzin would not be shooting any lightning at Iroh, but I believe the firebender would figure out a way to counter a Tenzin assault through his adaptation of waterbending techniques. So it would seem that Iroh would get the ultimate edge. He edges past his Tenzin's versatility and power levels, and though their defensive efforts are similar enough, Iroh's offense, coupled with the innate devastation of firebending, would give him an edge as well. Tenzin was a very good airbender, certainly a black belt of the airbending community. Iroh too was a master of firebending, but where he differed from Tenzin is his transcendence of his firebending techniques. This is why I think Tenzin never had the ability to fly before the emergence of Zahir. He was very good, but he limited himself to his strict discipline and teachings. To command the power of flight, one had to enter the void, free themselves from the earthly tether, something Tenzin had a hard time dealing with. This would also extend to his inability to delve into the spirit world. He was too bogged down by rules and principles rather than his own insights. By contrast, Iroh found it very easy to touch the spirit world and to look outside his by-the-books teachings, instead finding his own path. And therefore, Iroh gets the edge in terms of his bending abilities.